Sounds like the Islanders are going to do something really, really stupid, so the Blue Jackets should try and take advantage of that. We're going to discuss Noah Dobson on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So today we're continuing with our let's talk about players that could improve the Blue Jackets theme that we've been going with for a few weeks now. And we talked about Rasmus Andersson on Monday. There's a better option out there, and it's Noah Dobson, who apparently is available. I don't know if he's less available now that they've got a new GM in place, but it sounds like he is still at least partially available. The Blue Jackets should be all over this. He's a phenomenal young defenseman that had a not great year on a kind of miserable Islanders team. The Blue Jackets should be all over this. So we're going to talk about Noah Dobson, like who he is as a player, what we can expect from him. We're going to talk about how he fits into the Blue Jackets' future plans. And we're going to take a look at what the potential trade could look like. I checked in with my friend and colleague over at Locked On Islanders, Gil Martin, to see basically what the deal was there. So we're going to talk about all of that. Let's start off by just kind of talking about Noah Dobson himself. Noah Dobson is a very young right shot defenseman, 25 years old. He's an RFA right now. And it seems like the Islanders, for whatever reason, want to move on from him, despite the fact that he has 230 career points in 388 games, only 39 points in 71 games this season, was a minus 16, which, again, I don't typically look as plus minus as part of, like, serious hockey analysis, unless we're looking at it as part of a bigger picture, right? And he was not as good this year as he was last year. He had almost half as many points. He had basically half as many assists. Last year, he had 60 assists. This season, he had 29. That's a big drop off. He was still creating a bunch. Like, his offense was still, like, he was creating it. He just wasn't finishing it, which is, we've all seen that, right? This season was an absolute outlier for him. His underlying stats, still very good. Like, he still creates a bunch of offense. He still gives up basically nothing at 5-on-5. His special teams are net average, basically, which honestly, for the Blue Jackets, I would take. Like, again, very young, only 25 years old, and is almost certainly going to bounce back next year, regardless of where he is, right? Whether he stays in New York, whether he gets traded, whatever. Like, this was an outlier season, and I think, well, maybe he won't have a bounce back in Long Island, because I don't know what's going on there with the coaching system. Like, I don't know how I feel about Patrick Roy as a coach. I know that he was on my short list of potential coaches for the Blue Jackets a couple of years ago, but it doesn't seem like he's doing much with the Islanders. I think having a new GM is probably a good thing for them, but I don't know what's up with the Islanders. Obviously, they have the first overall pick coming up, but they also, like, they've extended Kyle Palmieri. They, like, want to extend some of their other older players, it sounds like, and I don't understand what the Islanders are doing. Like, again, like, just on a this scale, trading Noah Dobson doesn't make any sense. Like, he's one of your best defensemen. Had a down year this year based on just the score sheet, which is not necessarily the best way to analyze young defensemen. But it also sounds like he's asking for a lot more money in negotiations than the Islanders are willing to give him. Now, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I think he's asking for, potentially Zach Werenski type money, which might be a little steep after the season he had. But if you want to bet on Dobson bouncing back. And I do think, again, if, for example, for the purposes of this experiment, if he does come to the Blue Jackets, can we expect him to improve in a system run by Dean Everson versus a system run by Patrick Roy, right? I don't, off the top of my head, know what the Islanders were like defensively last season. My guess is not great. I think also their goaltending looked a lot less good than it usually is, right? Like Ilya Sorokin needed to be God for them to have a chance of getting anywhere, and he was fine this season, right? He was not the Vezina candidate that we're expecting. The Islanders in general were kind of miserable defensively. Noah Dobson was one of the worst on the team with plus minus, which again I don't necessarily truck with as a metric for player evaluation, but it sounds like he was probably just having a bad season in a sea of not great seasons for the Islanders. Again, whether that's a systems problem, whether that is a player problem, like he might just need to go somewhere else, right? Like typically speaking, the Isles were not good defensively this season. They were atrocious at special teams, like worse than the Blue Jackets, which is again very impressive. Their finishing was bad. Their goaltending was about average. So like in general, the Islanders were not a thrilling team this season. So it probably it stands to reason that they will bounce back a little bit. But typically speaking, or generally speaking, when you have this kind of long drawn out thing of this young extremely good RFA is available, I would put money on him being traded. Like again, I still don't think that's the right thing for the Islanders to do, depending on what they want. But we'll talk about what they want back in a trade in a second here. But the Blue Jackets should be all over this. Like you don't get defensemen this good available for trade. Like I know everyone is talking about, Anderson's available for a trade. I know Bo Byram is kind of on that list. Noah Dobson is, for my money, better than Bo Byram, I think. He is, of all of the defensemen that I've kind of looked at adding, he is the best one of them, right? Like, I prefer him to Ekblad. I prefer him to Anderson. I prefer him to Power, who we looked at briefly, Byram. I prefer him to Gavrikov just because of the age, and I think Dobson will fit into the timeline better. And also Dobson is a right defender and a right-hand shot, which Gavrikov, for all his pros, is still a left defenseman. So we would still have the same issue if we have defensemen playing on the wrong side, which doesn't seem like a real issue in Everson's system, but if you can go out and get a guy like Dobson, like he's just the best option out there. And for some reason, he's available, which is wild, truly wild. Let's take a quick break and we'll talk about where he could fit into the Blue Jackets system, because obviously there's some obvious holes, and I wanted to kind of maybe throw some things around. So we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First of all, I've got to tell you about Rougier. You've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis, maybe you even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougier Ready. Rougier Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost your blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougier's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, which is on average about 15 minutes, which is amazing. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch to Rougier, so if traditional options haven't worked for you, they might be the answer. And it's completely online. They connect you with a board-certified doctor and ship your treatment directly to your door discreetly. Head to Rougier.com/LockedOnNHL and use code LockedOnNHL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LOCKEDONNHL and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rouget website for full safety information. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk about where Noah Dobson fits in on this team, because Noah Dobson is a top pairing defenseman, right? So you've got a question now, right? Let's say, and we'll talk about the trade and what that could look like in a second here, but you've made the trade, and now for the purposes of this, Dante Fabro has signed an extension, and so your top four is Werenski, Fabro, Matejchuk, Dobson, right? Noah Dobson is a better defenseman than Dante Fabro. So do you put him on that top line with Werenski and move Fabro down to play with Matejchuk and hope that Dobson and Werenski can kind of recreate the magic that Fabro and Werenski recreated this year? Or do you spread the wealth a little bit, put Dobson on that second pairing? He's probably going to get first pairing minutes. Like, he'll play a lot of penalty kill. He'll probably be on the second power play unit. And, play him on the second pairing with a guy like Matejchuk and hope that that's like, I know that that's enough, right? Or, not enough, but he plays at the minute. He averaged this season about 23 minutes. So he's probably going to look to average about that again. He's not going to be looking to play Zach Werenski minutes because basically no one does that. But he's going to look to play top pairing minutes, if not on the top pairing. So do you throw him on the top pairing and play him like a number two defenseman, or do you put him with Matejchuk and see what happens? Like, the Blue Jackets have the luxury of like flexibility if they bring in Dobson as well. Like last season they were basically kind of stuck in that they didn't really have much flex. Like, they tried some things, but they didn't have a ton of flexibility in what the pairings looked like, right? It was Provorov and Werenski on the top pairing, and then it was Severson and Christensen on the second pairing, and then it was Harris and Johnson, or Jiricek and Johnson, or whoever was on that third pairing. While Gabranson was out injured, right? They bring Fabro in. Suddenly, they've got flexibility. They can move Provorov back to the left if they want. They can move him down onto the second pairing, which is what they did. They placed him with Matejchuk when he got the call up in November, and they got lucky that Fabro found that real chemistry with Werenski. So again, there's a chance that Dobson does the same thing. Like, Werenski might just be really easy to play with. That being said, they've been looking for someone to play with Werenski for basically since Seth Jones left, right? Is that he's had a bunch of different partners, no one really longer than about 5 minutes. Fabro comes and immediately clicks. So to me, Dobson is going to be your second right defenseman, who again probably gets a decent amount of penalty kill time, probably gets a decent amount of power play time, and honestly probably plays the second most minutes on the team. Like, it's going to be Werenski first, and then it'll probably be either Fabro or Dobson for second. Matejchuk will kind of hover around there. He's obviously your two lefty, your second pairing left defenseman at this point. And again, you've got that flexibility to potentially put Dobson with Werenski and Fabro with Matejchuk if you need to. But for me, if Fabro returns, you don't mess with a good thing, right? It feels like those are the pairings you start with, and if something goes wrong, someone gets injured, knock on wood, then you've got Dobson to be a legitimate option at that first pairing right defenseman, because the Blue Jackets have had a ton of right defensemen and then suddenly have no right defensemen, right? Like, they've got Severson, who is a middle to bottom, like, he's a bottom four guy. He's not a top pairing defenseman. Arguably, he's not a second pairing defenseman. Gabranson, bottom pairing defenseman. Fabro is your top four guy. You've got a big hole there to play in the second pair. Severson's not a second pairing guy. Typically, like, Branson's super not. Provorov was fine, but is a left defenseman that I don't think returns to the team. Harris is probably gone. Jack Johnson is gone. Like, Jake Christensen plays a little bit of right, but is mostly a left defenseman. I really like slotting him in at the third pairing left defense spot. So that, your left defense is sorted. You've got to figure out your right defense. And I think Dobson's a really, really good option for that. I think he's a much better option than Anderson. He creates less offense, but he's way better defensively. Like, stupidly better defensively. I know he had a down season this most recent season, but on average, again, I'm on hockeyviz.com for this. He is on average 7% better than league average at 5-on-5 defense, whereas Anderson is 13% worse than average at 5-on-5 defense. Like, that's a 20-point difference. Dobson is 20% better at defense than Anderson, which is wild. Obviously, what this means, though, is that, well, B, he's younger, which is great. He doesn't have a contract at the minute, which might impact what you pay for him, but he fits into the timeline much better than Anderson as well. Anderson is, I believe, 28, 29. If you give him that 8-year contract that he's probably going to get, he's going to be, 36 by the end of it. If you give Noah Dobson a 7 or 8-year contract, he's only going to be 32, 33 by the end of it. So, he fits into the timeline way better. He's in that sweet spot between kind of the older guys on the team, or the older core guys on the team, like Werenski, and the younger guys like Matejchuk. He's about Fabro's age, I think. He just feels like he fits in perfectly with the timeline that the Blue Jackets are on. I know that Anderson blocks a lot more shots than Dobson does, but that's really kind of all that Anderson does better than Dobson, if I'm being honest. So Dobson's, for my money, for a given value of available, he's the best available defenseman right now. But what are you going to have to give up for him, right? That's the big question here. So we'll take a quick break, and then I will talk about the trade that I have kind of come up with and ran past, again, my colleague Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders, and then we'll try and unpack that and see what an actual trade could look like. So we'll do that in just a second here at Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking about Noah Dobson today. Blue Jackets should trade for him. Blue Jackets could trade for him. What could they give up, or what would they have to give up? So I went and spoke to Gil Martin, who hosts Locked On Islanders, wonderful friend, wonderful colleague, and basically said, okay, I'm putting together a mock trade for Noah Dobson for the Blue Jackets. Are there bad contracts that you want to give? Like, are there bad contracts that you're trying to get out from under? And also, what do you want in return for a trade? And so he came back to me and was like, yes, obviously we have bad contracts. Lou Lamoriello, who's done a real number on this team. His two options for the contract were Pierre Engvall, who's making $3 million a year until 2030. So he's got 5 years left on his contract. Or Scott Mayfield, who's making $3.5 million until 2030. So another 5-year contract left. Scott Mayfield has a full no-trade clause. Pierre Engvall has a 16-team no-trade clause. Pierre Engvall is a fourth liner. He's a very serviceable fourth liner, but he is still a fourth liner. Scott Mayfield is a bottom pairing right-handed defenseman. So he's their Gabranson, essentially, but he's signed for a lot more term. Now, again, if you can figure out a way to get rid of the Severson contract and you take that Mayfield contract in, like, that to me feels like, okay, well, we'll take Dobson, we'll take Mayfield, we'll take that entire contract. I don't necessarily think that Severson goes back the other way. He might. I don't think so. But we'll take that entire Mayfield contract off you, and we'll do it for 14th overall this year. We'll do, Yegor Chinakhov. We'll do, probably a second or a third round pick next year. And that's kind of our starting point, and we'll see where we go from there. It gives the Islanders a second top 15 pick this year. It gives them a top 6 forward that can score, which is something that Gil says that the Islanders are very interested in. And it gives them a little bit more flexibility, and it means that they don't get nothing from Noah Dobson, and they get out from underneath the Mayfield. Now, if we take Dobson and Mayfield, they may in fact want a defenseman to come back. I don't think that defenseman is going to be Damon Severson, but I wonder if you could include, if this deal comes together in the next week or so, I wonder if you could include something like the rights to Jordan Harris, who is a very good young two-way defenseman that for whatever reason didn't click in the Blue Jackets system. Like he was an excellent defenseman for Montreal and just for whatever reason never really got going in Columbus. And I don't know whether that's that he never really got a chance. I don't know whether that was that the system disagreed with him. I don't know whether it was that he had inconsistent line mates, inconsistent ice time, didn't know whether he was coming, going, in, out, whatever. But he still, I think, there's some value there. And I wonder if he's potentially an option to go the other way for the Islanders. I also wonder if they would take Severson if there was some money retained, especially if you're taking Mayfield away from them. If you retain like 25% of Severson's contract, then yes, you're still taking on a not ideal contract the other way, but you're making the money work a little bit and you're giving them a serviceable bottom four defenseman. Because as much as we hate on Damon Severson, he is still a serviceable bottom four defenseman. Right? He's still he could be a serviceable second pair defenseman for the Islanders. Who again, it would be easier if we knew which direction the Islanders were going in. Like, do they want to get younger and like, is this the start of their rebuild? This first overall pick, or is this? They want to retool on the fly. Are they going to keep going with the plan that they're on right now? Like, I don't know that a full rebuild is in the cards, just looking at the contract that they're on. Like, 28-year-old Matt Barzal is signed to 2031. 30-year-old Bo Horvat is signed to 2031. Ryan Pulock is signed. He's 30 and he's signed to 2030. Adam Pelech is 30. He's signed to 2029. Ilya Sorokin is signed till 2032. Like, they got to do something. And again, I don't know that trading Noah Dobson is the right answer, but if it's the answer that gets him on our team, like I'm more than okay with that, Like I'm way more invested in the Blue Jackets having Noah Dobson than I am the Islanders having him. So without knowing which direction they're going to go in, like, do they want picks and prospects? Do they want players back? Like, but I think, you start with a first and Igor Chinikov and potentially a defensive prospect. Like, I wonder if someone like a Corson Ceulemans or a Samuel Konazko is someone who is an option for the Islanders, someone that they can, bring into the system. They've kind of quietly started to rebuild their absolutely diabolical prospect pool. They picked up Callum Ritchie from the Avalanche. Obviously, they're going to probably get Matthew Schaefer from the NHL draft in a couple of days now. They've got Maxim Sipakov, who is a really strong young Russian player that had a decent rookie season for them this year. Like they've got pieces to become younger, but they also like gave Kyle Palmieri a brand new contract. They've got 3 players over the age of 30, 4 players over the age of 30 that are currently signed for at least the next 4 years. Like, I don't know what they're doing. So it's tough to know, but a starting point of that 14th overall pick, Igor Chinikov, and then something else with the potential of taking Scott Mayfield's contract back the other way. And he's your Gabranson replacement, for when Gabranson probably leaves at the end of next season. I don't love taking on another bad defense contract, if I'm being honest, but Mayfield makes like half the price of Severson. And does basically the same job. So again, this all kind of hinges on being able to move Severson, whether that's to the Islanders, whether that's somewhere else, I don't know, but it's an option, right? And I thought about, in terms of like adding more, like I wondered if Cole Sillinger was an option to add into this trade. I'm not sold on it. If this is a sign and trade and you can get Noah Dobson to a long-term extension, then I'd probably be okay with it. But I do still feel, and I talked about this last week when I did the Sillinger episode, like I do still feel vaguely wary about like you don't like thinking that you can just get rid of your third line center because you have 2 really good centers and you can add more like later on. Like obviously you got Luca Del Barbaloo's banging at the door. You've got options, but it still feels like the Blue Jackets have center depth until they don't, right? Like look at a couple of seasons ago where they had it was the beginning of Pierre-Luc Dubois' last season with the team. And so they had like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Mikko Koivu, Boone Jenner, Sean Corrali, I believe was their 4 centers. And I was like, this is great. This is real center depth. The Blue Jackets haven't had real center depth in a million years. And then Koivu gets COVID and then retires, and then Dubois gets traded for a winger, and then suddenly you've got like Boone Jenner is your 1C, and 18-year-old Cole Sillinger is... All right, Cole Sillinger, I don't even think was even drafted by that point. Like, who was playing center for this team in 2021? It was just Boone Jenner and Sean Corrali, right? It wasn't. It was other guys that we've forgotten by now, like Texier probably. I think Texier, I think was like the 2C for a large chunk of that season, which seems wild considering. But like... This, like, hence my point, right? Like, you have center depth until you don't, and I don't think the Blue Jackets have enough center depth right now to ship off one of their young team-controlled centers unless they're getting something that a decent center prospect back. So I would be wary of including him. If they could make it work, I'd be okay with it. Like, he's not untouchable. And if you're getting a player of Noah Dobson's caliber, like, it makes it a lot more palatable, but I'm not sure that this is the move right now. But to summarize, absolutely go get Noah Dobson. Sign him to a long-term extension. There's your top four. You've got Werenski, Fabro, Matejchuk, Dobson. That's your top four for the next, at least, 5 years minimum, right? Job's good. Job sorted. And that's kind of what I've got for today. We've got more draft coverage coming at you tonight around about dinner time. I think we're going to talk about Logan Hensler. We're going to talk about Blake Fiddler, and we're going to do another honorable mention. We're going to talk about Victor Eklund, who is not going to fall to 14, but man, it would be good if he did. So that's coming up later today. Thank you for listening, making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets are free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO-Blue Jackets over on Blue Sky as well. Email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And until later tonight, make sure you stay locked on.